Welcome to our guide to referencing. In this video, we'll look at what plagiarism is, why you need to reference, and how to avoid any issues. We'll also cover BU Harvard referencing style as an example of how BU asks its students to reference. This being said, some specific courses at BU, such as law and psychology, follow a different referencing style. It is important to know that each university and specific course may have their own style for referencing, so it's important to find this out when you first start your course. So let's start off by looking at what plagiarism actually is. Plagiarism is the action or practice of taking someone else's work, idea, etc., and passing it off as your own. It is also known as literary theft. So there are two types of plagiarism. The first type is deliberate plagiarism, which covers copying or commissioning the work of others, copying directly from print sources, or cutting and pasting from the internet and passing it off as your own. The second type of plagiarism is unintentional plagiarism, which covers failing to reference sources, incorrect use of paraphrasing, or even the concept of self-plagiarism. This is where you copy work from a previous assignment that has already been submitted for grading, and you take the work from that assignment and submit it as part of your new assignment. Every bit of your work that is submitted must be original work. It's also important to note that plagiarized work will be penalised regardless of the intent. This is why reference is really important, and this will guard you from being accused of plagiarism. So why do we need to reference? Referencing is really important. You need to indicate where you have referred to sources written and produced by others so that you acknowledge their work. It's also used by others to be able to verify quotations and follow up with the cited author's arguments. So consistency and accuracy of your referencing is really important. Finally, referencing is necessary to avoid plagiarism, which we mentioned was a serious offence against university rules. So, very few people enjoy referencing, so why must we do it? Number one, it allows others to verify what you are saying and that it is in the right context. Number two, it shows those that are marking your work where you have found your sources. Number three, it will develop your skills and attention to detail, as it's important that you reference consistently throughout your assignments. Number four, you'll also get marks awarded for good referencing, highlighting the importance placed upon it. So let's have a look at the BU's referencing Harvard style. It is a Harvard style which is also known as the author date method. There are two parts to this style. First is the simple citing in the main text of your work, which is just the author and the date. And the second part is where you list the full references at the end of your work. So this is your academic, or the person marking your work can check the materials and sources for the accuracy of your work. We'll now look at citing in the main text of your work. There are three main ways. If the author's name appears in the text, you simply have to put the date. For example, this view is supported by Cottrell. Now, because we have mentioned the name in the sentence, our citation is simply just the year, 2008. Another way of putting in your citation, if the author name doesn't appear in the sentence, you'll need to add the author and date in the brackets. For example, we have paraphrased Cottrell but not mentioned Cottrell, so the citation will be Cottrell 2008. Finally, if you mention the year in the sentence, then the citation is just the author. In our example, this view is supported by a 2008 book, so we can only cite Cottrell as the author. Let's talk about organisations or corporate authors. Now, the first time you refer to an organisation or corporate author in a citation, you'll need to refer to the full name of the organisation or corporate author and in brackets the abbreviation. You can then refer to the abbreviation in future citations. Our example here says, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and in brackets IPCC, and then the date, 2013. You can then refer all other instances in the abbreviated form and then include the date. Now, we'd use a corporate author when you're looking at a piece of work where there is no named individual. When you're using a book or journal article, there is always a named author. When an organisation or corporate authors usually come up, is when you're using websites. The organisation then becomes the author. In academic writing, names can be used in abbreviated forms when they've been given in full. For example, Office for National Statistics then becomes ONS. It's important to note that you must always give full names of organisations and corporate authors in your list of references at the end of your work. Let's look at using et al. In citations. Citations in the text depend differently depending on how many authors have written the text. When using a single author, you would state the author, for example, Cottrell 2008. When there are two authors, you list both, for example, Price and Mayer 2007. Whereas when there are more than two authors, you can use et al. For example, Munsak et al. 2003. It's important to note that when you are listing titles that have more than one author at the end of your work, always list the authors in the order in which they appear on the source. You can also not use et al. In your referencing. There may be a time when you are citing the same author that has written more than one article in the same year. For example, if you had two articles written by Johnson in 1994, you would put an A and B after the year to distinguish between the two articles referenced. It's important to remember that the letters assigned to each citation are determined by the order of references used in the text. We will now look at second-hand citing. When you read about another source than the source you are reading, you may cite second-hand. Basically, you are reading a book and they have cited another author. But you're not reading that author's original work. You're technically reading it second-hand. It is always really good academic practice to track down that original work, and you can just provide a straightforward citation like we've previously mentioned. If you cannot get hold of that original work, you may cite it second-hand. We'll work through an example. You're reading a book by Chapelhoe and Crouch, and they are referring to Ollerton's work. So here's an example. You can see around halfway down it states that it should be enjoyable, and the citation Ollerton 2003. Now we are not actually reading Ollerton's original work, we are reading about that in another book. As I said, please track down the original work if the library has it, but if it doesn't, you can provide a second-hand citation. So this is how it would look. Our example is here, education should be seen as a pleasurable as well as practical. Ollerton 2003, cited by Chapelhoe and Crouch 2007. We would first provide the details of the work we are citing, Ollerton 2003, followed by cited by Chapelhoe and Crouch 2007. In the reference, you only list the source you've actually read, so in this case that would be Chapelhoe and Crouch as seen as the example reference. Let's have a look at short quotations. If the quote is less than a line, it may be included in the body of the text in double quotation marks. In our example, as Cottrell explains, and we start the quotation, plagiarism is treated very seriously, and then we provide the date and page numbers as Cottrell was mentioned in the text. You only need to provide page numbers when it is a direct quote or including a table taken from an article or book. If you are paraphrasing, you do not need to provide page numbers. For longer quotations, which are longer than a line, it must be indented and in double quotation marks. As Cottrell isn't mentioned in the text, it must be included alongside the date and page numbers in brackets after the quote. Once you have finished the quote, you can just start the next paragraph and continue with your work. Sometimes you may wish to refer to data that has been collected through interviews or correspondence. This is treated differently from when normal material that you would normally use in your work, as it is not recoverable data because it is unpublished and you are the only one who has access to that data. However, you will still cite personal communications, but only in the main text. You need to provide as much information as you can, including surname and occupation, along with the exact date of the material you are using. Finally, when you are citing this type of research data, which you have collected, it is good practice that you include copies or summaries of source data in appendices after your reference list, which will be at the end of your work. Here is an example of the in-text citation, which refers to the details of the type of data, date, and name of person cited. Make sure you are given personal communication appendix number to correspond with the in-text citation, where the full data can be seen. We've looked at citing within the main text, so now we're going to look at how to write full references at the end of your work. This is what an example of a reference list would look like at the end of your work. You can see it is written in alphabetical order, starts with Bournemouth University, Creswell, Kroll, and then Simpson. Your list would probably be a lot longer than this, but this is just an example. So now we're going to look at the referencing of the four main source types. The first is referencing a book. Here is the template for referencing a book. You include surname, family name, and then the initials in capital letters, then the year of the publication, and then the title of the book, which goes in italics. If it's an online book, please put online in brackets. If it's a printed book, there is no need to do anything. If there is an edition such as second or third, add this in the next section. If it is the first edition, there is no need to add an edition in. And finally, the place of the publication and the publisher. You can see from the example that this is a second edition, so this was added in. It is important to have the correct punctuation, as this is also part of the consistency of referencing. The in-text citation would just be Cottrell 2003, whereas the reference will be Cottrell S 2003, the Study Skills Handbook in italics. It's the second edition. It was published in Basingstoke by Palgrave Macmillan. So this is where you would go to find the information. This will be from the front page and title page of the books. All of the information that you'll be able to find is on those particular parts. If you're struggling to find any of the information, please go and speak to your librarian or an academic who will be able to help you out. Now let's look at how you'd reference a contribution in an edited book. This is slightly more complicated. You should know if you're using an edited book which has multiple contributing authors, as it should state that the book has editors, as well as each chapter of the book should be assigned to different authors. So to reference a contribution in an edited book, you should include the following: surname, family name, followed by the initials and the year of publication. Title of the contribution is basically the same as the title of the chapter. You then put in editors, surname, family name, and initials. If it's just one editor, you'd put ed. If there's more than one, you put eds. This is then followed by the year of publication. You would only put a year of publication if it's different to the contribution. 99% of it will be exactly the same as the year it was published, and you will therefore not have to add a date in here. You should then add in the title of the book in italics, and again, if it's online, put it in brackets where applicable. Again, with additions, add this in if it's only a second, third, fourth, etc. edition, not the first edition. And finally, add the place of publication and publisher. The last thing you'll need to add is the page number of the contribution or title page. You can see the example here, Arneson, 2003, Sociology, Critique of Modernity, Views Across the European Divide. That's the title of the chapter. In Ben Raphael's, here's the editor, denoted by the ed. In Sociology and Ideology, which is the title of the book, that goes in italics. and that was published in Leiden by Brill, and the page numbers there are 19 to 39. The in-text citation would just be Arneson 2003. This is what an edited book might look like. You can see the details of the publisher, Brill, and publication date and location. If in this case it has two locations, which is Leiden and Boston, just take the first stated, and in this case it was Leiden. All of the information should be found in the chapters or on the title pages as well. So a common source of research you'll be looking at will be journal articles, especially when studying at university. In this case, you'll provide the surname, family name, initials, year of publication, title of the article, and in the case of journals, the title of the journal in italics. Again, if it's online, add that in brackets where applicable. This is then followed by the volume number and part number. Part number is also known as the issue number, and you might likely find issue numbers rather than part numbers being described. This is then followed by the page number of the article, and here you can see an example. So this is Brown, Dixon, Humphreys, McQuillan and Smears, promoting academic writing reference and skills, outcome of an undergraduate e-learning project. That is the title of the article, and it is found in the British Journal of Educational Technology, and as the title of the journal, that goes in italics. It is an online journal, so therefore it's in brackets, and you can see that 39 was the volume number, and the issue number was 1, that always goes in the brackets, and the page number was 140 to 156. As you can see in the in-text citation, it's Bryan et al. 2008. That is because there was more than 2 authors, and therefore the et al. Was used for the in-text citation. Here is what a typical journal article might look like. All information needed for references should be clearly stated at the top of the journal articles, so it's a really good place to find all that information for your reference. Finally, let's look how we would reference a web page. Again, you need to provide a surname or family name, but as stated earlier in this recording, that some articles and publications don't have an attributor author. Here you would use the organisation or corporate author title instead of the family surname. You will then provide the year and title of the web page, which goes in italics, which is obviously online in brackets. The place of publication follows, which can be sometimes tricky to find. So you can go to the Contact Us or About Us page on the web page, which usually provide a location, name of the publisher. Finally, add the available from URL and the access date, which should be the day, month and year you accessed the web page. You can see an example below from the Higher Educational Statistics Agency. So Higher Educational Statistics Agency 2020. In the references, as we said earlier, you must use the full name of the organisation. This was the Publications Archive, that was the name of the web page, and you find that online, so it's denoted in the brackets. It was published in Cheltenham by Hesse, and it was available from the website provided, and it was accessed on the 25th of June 2020. The in-text citation would be Higher Education Statistics Agency, and in brackets Hesse 2020. If I wanted to then use Hesse later on, I could just use the abbreviation. So now we can have a look at where we find some of the information on the web page. So in this case, the author is the organisation. There was no date given on this web page, but browsing links around the page, we can sensibly conclude that the site is being regularly updated, so it's logical to put 2020 or the date when accessed. Title of the web page is found here, which is Publications Archive. Now, if in doubt, you can also check some of the browser's title bars, as it will sometimes state the web page title. The available from URL will be found in the search bar of your browser at the top. And as mentioned before, the place of publication can be found in the Contact Us or About Us pages, usually found at the bottom bar of the web page. So finally, to recap, we've discussed what referencing skills are. So in particular, what is plagiarism? And it's a very serious offence if you are caught plagiarising. We've also talked about why we need to reference to obviously avoid plagiarism, but also to help your markers or your academics who are marking your work to be able to go back and look at your references and to see where your work has come from. And again, you get good marks for good referencing. And finally, how to avoid any issues, and that's by referencing consistently throughout and using the styles that we have provided here or which your university might provide with you to ensure that you are using it consistently throughout your work.